I remember when I was about to run my first campaign, I was horrified. I was so nervous that I would forget something, I would forget some rules or anything. So I spent so much time reading up on rules and trying to learn everything I could. In today's video, I'm going to give you 5 tips that will make you more comfortable when you're about to run your first campaign. And if you stay all the way to the end, there will be a little bonus tip for you. So tip number 1, do some research on the genre you're going to run. If you're going to run a Call of Cthulhu investigation, then maybe go and watch something like Sherlock Holmes and watch some horror movies. Try to see what is it that a horror movie do to make it feel horror. For instance, horror movies, they are often using dark scenes. They are using music to like emphasize the mood, like music boxes or strings. Or maybe you're going to run a classic high fantasy. Then go and watch some fantasy movies or read some fantasy novels. Watch something like Merlin on the BBC or Robin Hood also from the BBC. Or maybe go and watch Game of Thrones if you want to be a little more inspired by political intrigue and scheming. Or just go all out classic and watch Lord of the Rings. There are a lot of good inspiration both for names and for music. These scenes, if you want to describe a tavern, then remember in Merlin when they enter a tavern, how does it look? How is the mood? How is it lit? But you don't have to watch fantasy if you're going to run a fantasy campaign, and you don't need to watch horror if you're going to run a horror campaign. You can watch a modern movie and draw inspiration and use it in your fantasy game. For instance, my players, they were in the Nine Hells and they met Mammon, one of the rulers of one of the layers. I took inspiration from one of the Saw movies.
I want to play a game.
Essentially, they were a group of people who were locked up in a house and they had to move through it. Each room had a trap which would kill one or more of the people. And the cassette tape, Jigsaw said something along the lines of,
Your lifelong instincts will tell you to do one thing, but I implore you to do the opposite. Let the games begin.
What that essentially means is the first room they enter, and there are these hiding rooms. And in the ceiling, there are full of traps, bombs, which will explode and kill everyone in the room, unless you get into one of these hiding spots. But here's the kicker. There are 8 people and only 7 hiding spots. So, naturally, you will fight for a spot for your survival. Except these spots, they are big enough to hold more than one person. Your instincts tell you to run and secure yourself, but they were advised to do the opposite. And that was the sentence that I took from Saw and created a plot down in the Nine Hells. It had nothing to do with the actual plot of the movie. I was just inspired by that single sentence. So what essentially I did in this encounter in the Nine Hells was Mammon sent the players into a house which was known as the House of Temptations. Each room was an encounter where they met a temptation. For instance, the very first encounter was this woman. She was completely naked and had been whipped and she had been crucified, but she was still alive. Naturally, the party's first instinct is, we need to save this lady. She's in pain. She's almost dead. And what happened? Well, after they took her down, she ran and opened a door, letting in a bunch of devils who attacked the party. They were told not to follow their instincts, but to do the opposite. And their instincts were to save the damsel in distress. In this very same encounter, I also were inspired by a Spanish movie called Pan's Labyrinth. And my inspiration from that movie was just one of the monsters. And that is a movie, I think it's supposed to happen during the late 1800s, early 1900s, something like that. By the way, it's a fantastic movie. You should go and watch it. They also met a guy who were attacked by devils, and obviously they wanted to help him because he was obviously losing, so we better be the heroes. Except that was their instinct, and that went wrong. And finally, what do adventures do after a long day of adventuring? they go and eat. So they got tired and they found a room full of a table, like a banquet, with a lot of delicious food. It wasn't poisoned. It actually tasted good. It was nourishing. And after they had eaten, they went to bed because there were bunks. But the bunks, on the other hand, one of them were I believe it's called an animated rug or a living rug. It is a monster which is basically a rug. I had reskinned it to be a mattress. So once one of the players went to sleep and fell asleep, the mattress wrapped itself around him and tried to smother him to death. My personally largest inspiration is Merlin from BBC, Supernatural and Game of Thrones. But you can draw inspiration from everywhere. Don't feel limited. Where do you draw your inspiration from? Let me know down in the comments below. So the second tip is, if you are not the type of GM who likes to write everything down, then you should be practicing your improvisation skills. This is not about improvising an encounter, only how you improvise a description. I mean, you could improvise an encounter if you want to. You can practice this everywhere. So here's 4 quick tips on how you can improvise a description. So the first thing is, what does it look like? Obviously, you have to describe what does the scene look like. If it's a tavern, how does it look? Is it full? Is it empty? Does it look nice? Does it look bad? The second thing is, what does it smell like? Does it smell nice and clean? Or does it smell of old beer and wine and sweat from the adventurers? The third thing is, how is the lighting? Is it brightly lit? Is it dimly lit? Is it dark? Also, what is the source of the lighting? Lighting, not lightning. What is the source of the lighting? Is it candles? Is it torches? Is it magical source? Maybe it is magical crystals lighting up the room. And finally, what do they hear? Is it deadly silent? Or maybe if it's in the tavern, the mood is high, people are cheering and singing, and marks are clanging against each other, while 3 bards are singing and playing and dancing over by the corner. Or if they're in an old house, the doors are creaking, the floors are creaking, there are a howling sound from the wind ripping, what do you call it? Like when the sound makes like a that sound. These shutters in the house is clanging against the windows, and the roof sounds like it's getting ripped off by the storm. So if you have these 4 things, then you can easily improvise any scene. You can also work with taste and feeling. I have a challenge for you. The next time you're standing in the kitchen over the pot cooking mac and cheese, or you're taking a bath, try to improvise a scene. Choose a scene and try and describe it. Maybe you want to describe a tavern, or maybe you'd like to describe the entrance of a dungeon, or maybe you want to describe a royal bedroom. You enter a 15 by 20 feet room. In the middle is a large bed dominating the room. To the left, you have a cupboard with an expensive looking carpet covering most of the floor. To the right, you have 2 huge windows letting the sun in, lighting the entire room. Just off to the bed, there is a bathtub. It is full of water, and there are still some remnants of foam from the soap. Now you can maybe even describe how it feels. You walk to the bathtub and just slightly let your fingers run through the water. It is still a little warm to the touch. It can be more than an hour, maybe an hour and a half since it was poured. I would like to know your improvised scene, so you could also write that down in the comments if you want to. Tip number 3 is draw from your real life experience. Now, I don't say that you have experience fighting dragons. Tip number 3 is draw from your personal experience. I don't say that you have experience fighting dragons and fucking whores on the local brothel. I mean, maybe you do, but that's besides the point. But you might have experience being on the local bar. Or maybe you liked camping outside in the forest when you were a child. So if you can recall these memories, then you can describe them to your players when they find themselves in similar situations, for instance, when your player is traveling through the forest, then remember how it was when you were camping with your family as a child and it started raining. Or when you have been on the bar and the music has been playing, people have been cheering and they've been so loud that you could barely make out your own thoughts. Describe that feeling you had, describe how it sounded, how it looked, how it smelled. So use your past memories and experience to describe similar situations for your players. Tip number 4, that is debriefing. So after every session, set aside 10-15 minutes and talk to your players. Have a debriefing. Ask them what did they like and what maybe didn't they like. Do they have any constructive criticism? There are no size fits all. Games are very much subjective and personal. So some people, they love a lot of combat. Some people love a lot of social interaction. Some people, they prefer going all Sherlock Holmes investigation style and infiltrating the local castle to steal documents from the king, while others just want to kick down the front door and kill the king. Maybe they enjoy puzzles, then introduce some puzzles. Maybe they hate puzzles, then don't introduce puzzles. Just remember that you might have 4 players, 1 of them hates puzzles, 3 of them don't. So throw in a puzzle now and then, because that player who doesn't like puzzles just have to sit that one out while the other 3 people, they spend 15 minutes or 20 minutes figuring out the puzzle. Because there are always going to be aspects of your game that not everyone will enjoy. But we need to say, okay, I don't enjoy this very much, but I know my friend enjoys it a lot. So I let my friend have some fun, and then in return he will let me have some fun at another time where he might not like what is happening. You will definitely run into a situation where you have done something and one of your players doesn't like it because it led to something bad for the player. Not every player is very good at handling when it's going south for the characters. For example, I had a player who was playing a warlock named Hysteria. Hysteria had the spell Summon Fiend, and Summon Fiend, it actually doesn't summon a fiend. It summons something that resembles a fiend and looks like a fiend. It is a fiendish spirit, if you will. And you decide whether it is a demon, a devil, or a Yugoloth. Yugoloth, that's a funny name. I always thought it sounded like someone is choking, like Yugoloth. The creature merely resembles one of these 3 types. One of the things you need in order to cast it is you need a ruby vial full of blood. And the player came across a body and he took some of its blood for his spell. Except that they were in the 9 hells. So I rolled some D100s, or a single D100, and gave it a 25% chance of going wrong. And guess what? It went wrong. So the body was indeed a human, but it had been possessed by a devil, so his blood was tainted. And so it tainted the spell. So instead of summoning a spirit resembling a Yugoloth, it summoned an actual Yugoloth. And he did not have control of it. So when he summoned the Yugoloth, it attacked him. And he was very unsatisfied with that outcome. I didn't want my player to feel bad and have such a bad experience, so I told him why. I do not generally recommend that you tell your players what is going on behind the DM screen, and don't tell them why things happen all the time. But if you have a player who is generally feeling bad or is really angry, then maybe sometimes, in this case, it didn't make any difference. I figured that the consequences of telling him was less than not telling him. I wanted him to know why, and when I told him why his spell went wrong, he was like, oh, that actually made sense. So he went from bloody hell, that sucked, to bloody hell, that's cool. So it's all about perspective from the players. How do they see the consequences? If they understand the consequences, or understand why the consequences are the way they are, then they have a much easier time accepting the consequences. Sometimes you just can't tell them why something happens the way they do, and you just have to say to them, look them in the eyes and say, please trust me, there is a very clear reason why things happened the way they did. And hopefully your players trust you and will say, okay, I really hope that one day in the future you can tell me why this happened, but I trust you. If they have any questions along the campaign, ask them to write them down, and then they can ask the questions at the end of the campaign and you can answer them all. Or sometimes you can just answer them right away if the answer is irrelevant to the story. If you have found this video helpful so far, then please click the like button to help spread this video to more new game masters, and maybe click the subscribe button. So the fifth and final advice is listen. Now I know that this is a very weird advice at first, but please hear me out. When I say listen, then I would like to divide it into 3 categories. There are 3 different times at where you need to listen. So the first one is, now I know this one is a weird sounding tip at first, but please hear me out. Let's break this into 3 categories: pre-game, in-game, and post-game. So first, pre-game. That is like, for example, session 0, where you listen to your players and they tell you what are the expectations, what would they like to see, what would they like to do in the campaign. But it is also your players' backstories. I mean, technically you're reading a backstory, not listening to it. I mean, you can, but I digress. When they give you a backstory, they give you 1 or more balls to play with, hopefully, if they are written like a meaningful backstory. I will be making a video on how to write the perfect backstory in the future. But for instance, they might give you an antagonist you can use, or they might give you some family members you can use. So if the players have a sister, you can use her as a plot or a hook. Maybe someone has been kidnapping people and her sister has been one of the player's sisters has been kidnapped. That is very incentivizing for the player, hopefully, or the character to go on the adventure. For example, I had a player who had a character. It was an Aasimar called Sardas, and in his background he had involved an angel called Seraphina, and Seraphina was a female angel who was possessing a male body and wearing a beige trench coat. And this angel was, when I first read his backstory, I was like, yeah, angel, alright, that's cool. And I told him he shouldn't expect much of this angel character, because angels are pretty powerful, and I don't want an angel to pop up and save the day every other session. But at that time I hadn't planned the entire 5-year campaign. Then we reached the point where my party needed to get into the 9 hells, and they were kind of stuck on how they would actually open a portal to hell. And then I thought of Seraphina, because angels and devils have always been in war. So Seraphina popped up and she helped them with what they needed in order to open a portal to Baator, also known as hell. And that wasn't planned when I read it the first time, but all of a sudden this little ball grew into a huge ball that I could play with. And Seraphina became a core part of the entire adventure through hell. It turns out that Seraphina was actually working together with Asmodeus. She was really getting to be a central part of the storyline. Now I wanted to give the players a hint that something was wrong. So the way they actually got into hell was they opened this portal and it started pouring out with devils, and then at the end of the encounter, a pit fiend showed up and killed almost all the party. One of the party members actually decided that, hell, this fight ain't for me, so he decided to just jump through the portal, and the rest was killed. But when they woke up in the 9 hells, and they were looking directly up at Seraphina, who had pulled them from the river Styx. But that was just a little side note. My point is that you need to look at your players' backstories and then try and look for golden eggs. Next is in-game listening. So in-game listening allows you to adapt on the fly. Your players, they will always be talking more than you. Hopefully, they should be talking more than you. So when they talk, listen. For instance, maybe your party is exploring a cave out in the middle of the forest in a swamp, and there are these green acid puddles all around the cavern floor. And your party, they start talking about maybe, could this be a black dragon living down here? You had planned that should be a huge ooze, but now the party starts talking about a black dragon. Now is your time to switch up your ooze for a dragon, because that will give your players the feeling that they actually figured it out. Don't tell them that you swapped the ooze for a black dragon, because that would ruin it, and that would be a huge crack in the trust that your players put in you. But behind the screen, you can do whatever you want. And then you can always figure out later why there was a black dragon in the first place. You don't always need to know why you put stuff in your game. Sometimes you can just plug an owlbear in and then say it's a random encounter. You can plug a dragon in and then try and connect the dragon later to your main story. So maybe in a half a year you have a story where you think, hey, that makes sense that the black dragon had something to do with this, and then plug it in, connect the strings, and that will just make you look like some very, very clever GM. Hell, I do it like that all the time. I actually used to do this a lot in my campaign, listening to my players and then using their ideas against them, and it actually ended up being kind of an internal joke or a meme. I mean, that was before memes even existed, but it would be whenever they were doing something and the players were discussing amongst themselves what they were going to do, then one of the players would interrupt and say, no, don't say that. Don't give the GM good ideas. So, I mean, it was fun because sometimes I took those ideas and some of them were quite deadly or bunkers. But my point is, don't overuse it. And the last thing is post-game. I mean, that is kind of the same as the debriefing, but I mean, you can also use the debriefing to find out when the players say that maybe they don't like this very much, then ask them, what would they like instead? Because then they tell you directly what they want. And if they say they do like this, use it more. Also use it to ask the players, what would they like to see next? Maybe they would like a specific monster. Maybe they would like to try and battle a bronze dragon, or maybe they'd like to try and see more face, or maybe they would like more puzzles. I promised you a bonus tip, so here it is. If you're a new GM, then chances are that you will most likely have a player with more experience than you. Now, don't feel bad or ashamed for asking that player for advice, or ask in general your players, how does this ruling work? How does this spell, this ability actually work? Just remember, you are the GM. You can always make a call. You don't have to be an experienced GM to say, hey guys, I'm not 100% sure how this rule works, this ability or this spell or whatever, but in this specific situation it works this way. And then we can look it up after the encounter, after the session, to see how it actually works. Most players will understand that, and if they don't, then maybe you should have a talk with them about why they don't understand it, and if they still don't understand it, well, then assert yourself. And if they can't accept that you're the GM and it's your prerogative to make rulings like that, maybe it's time to find a new player. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. And as always, keep on nerding.